This week in a new adaptation of Stephen King's The Running Man from Edgar Wright starring Glen Powell drops in theaters. So let's talk about it. While I'm talking, be sure to join me down below in the comments section. Let me know, what did you think about the film, and give me that point of reference. Have you seen the 1987 Arnold Schwarzenegger film, or have you read the book, and how does all of it compare? Speaking of the book, you can listen to the book for free by signing up for a free trial of Audible at audibletrial.com. If you're like me and you like to read with your ears, not your eyes, you should consider joining Audible. I've been a member since August of 2015, over 10 years now. I have purchased the audiobook for Running Man. I haven't quite listened to it just yet because I'm listening to something else. As soon as I finish it, I'm going to start Running Man, and you yourself can listen to Running Man or any other audiobook of your choice by signing up for that free trial of Audible at audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. I am a subscriber, I am a member. I do highly recommend Audible. And let's get started with the good. And right off the bat, Running Man has so much going for it. It's based off of a Stephen King book, so great source material. It's being directed by Edgar Wright, an exciting director. It's got an awesome cast populating all of the different roles, and it was given a nice Hollywood budget. Pretty much, it's working from great material, being executed by great people, and it has the resources to pull off what they're trying to do with this story.
I had actually read the book as a teenager before I saw the 1987 version. So I was well aware, even as a teen, that it was a radically different adaptation. And so I think as I became a movie maker, it always stuck in the back of my head that there was another entire movie to be made from the source material.
And for all of those reasons, it's like a very slick, well-made popcorn film that merges together a whole bunch of different genres. It is set in this authoritarian future where the government and this network are intertwined. The entire population is controlled through propaganda, and the poor are utterly desperate for any means to survive, and so they join these reality TV shows in a desperate attempt to make money. But it's an action film filled with big bombastic set pieces. It's got just a little bit of comedy sprinkled in there. It's not like overt comedy. This is not Shaun of the Dead, Edgar Wright, but you of course still have humor, lighthearted moments throughout it. It's thrilling, especially as it goes along. It gets more and more stressful and suspenseful as you're like, how is this guy gonna get out of this mess? Oh crap, this whole thing is rigged against him. And kind of to that point, what I said before, it has this whole conspiracy aspect to it of a government and network conspiring against the people for control, and a resistance pushing back against them. So it's a very personal story about a man going to desperate ends to try and get medicine for his daughter, but also it's this very grand national story of corruption at the exact same time. To that point, it's this very robust and large world. Arnold Schwarzenegger, over the last weeks or so, commenting on this new version of the film.
The only movie that I always wanted to have redone in my movies was Running Man. And so now this one really did it and did exactly that. So really fantastic.
Thank you.
Basically said The Running Man is the only one of his movies that he would want to have redone because of the resources at the time, what they could do. The story was much smaller than the book itself. And it kind of took what was supposed to be this national competition and put it basically in an arena. This film is able to tell the grander version of the story, where it takes place all across the United States on this hunt for this guy that's playing the show. And everyone is involved. Everyone is trying to rat him out. Everyone is trying to collect rewards for saying where he's at. And so it just has this massive scope and size to it as we're on this chase across the United States. And, planes, trains, and automobiles tie into it. There's hideouts. He tries to hide in plain sight. He tries to hide in remote locations. And it kind of builds out this whole set of rules for all the different ways that he can be discovered, his location can be discovered, all the reasons people would sell him out, the technology that is used to track people, and little ideas of taking talking about little things about, how our phones are always listening to us, and you'll have a conversation with someone and you'll get on Facebook and they'll have an ad for that product and it's really creepy. Well, you play out that level of surveillance in a context where you're a person that's on the run for your life against the whole government network and all of the public. And it just has that level of paranoia kind of interwoven into the entire film. There's also some nice ways where the story uses some ambiguity to kind of throw off the audience of, at times you're playing around with what's kind of going on in Ben's head. It uses the fact that you can't trust what anyone's telling you. You can't trust the news and the media. In the storytelling itself, to where there's times where you're sitting there like horrified at something that happened and you don't know if it happened, but you're mad that even the idea was put out there, and that's the same feeling the characters have. And so it like arouses these big emotions in the frustration and the uncertainty really well in the way that it toys with you when you don't know when it's being a reliable and unreliable narrator. Of course, the cast here is just an awful lot of fun. Of course, we've got Glen Powell, my close personal friend that I've spoken to for 30 seconds, in the lead. And, he just continues to establish himself as the rising star, the rising leading man of the last few years, that he can come off like the family man, but you can believe him as this snarky, antagonistic everyman put into this competition, desperately trying to survive. And he can, be involved in the action, and he can crack the joke at the end of it, and you buy into all of it. He can transition between, you can have the love of a family man, the anger of someone put in a ridiculous situation. Seems like Glen Powell likes to play characters that play characters, where once again, he's a guy that puts on disguises and plays these other characters like he did in Chad Powers, as well as Hitman. And then you have like Josh Brolin playing just like the sleaziest of guys that's trying to sweet talk everyone and manipulate everything to be perfectly. Domingo Coleman is the host of the show and just is so fun as the guy that knows he's on top of the world and the system isn't rigged against him, and he's like knows just how popular, cool, and how much power he has, and he's just like he's the guy that has the read on the room at each moment on how to play it just right. There's all kinds of other people filling in some of these roles. A lot of them are just kind of cameos. Like William H. Macy is only in 2 scenes in the movie. So some of the people that are teased, they're only in it really briefly. And to what's kind of already been discussed here already, there's a bunch of fun action in it, and variety in the action of you'll be in a hotel, you'll be in a car chase, and having just a little bit of wit in some of the car chases. One of them has been in the trunk of a car while being chased, and just there's always something a little bit different in different contexts, so it doesn't feel like we're just repeating the same action over and over again. And I think the inherent nature of the source material from Stephen King, Richard Bachman, has a lot of kind of ideas that at the time were a little bit ahead of the curve, and by now feel like very much part of the conversation that we're having now. There's a book that came out in 1976 from Francis Schaeffer, a Christian philosopher, How Should We Then Live? And it basically tracked worldviews and the most popular way of thinking throughout Western civilization. And then it kind of got to modern times and predictions for the future and what was being set up. And in 1976, he was talking about how the amount of trust and the amount of authority that the news has, and whoever holds the megaphone, whoever has the microphone has, creates a situation where the public is extremely susceptible to manipulation, propaganda, and an authoritarian state. This is 1976 and has all these examples of the way you can lie through news and media and stuff like this. 5 years after that, Stephen King puts out the populist book, sci-fi dystopian adventure version of it. And of course, then the movie came out 5 years after that. And at the time, those were kind of fresh ideas, a little bit ahead of the curve. But the idea that you can't trust what you're seeing, you're being lied to, that's just the world in which we live in. And so as much as this is kind of this dystopian future, it very much speaks to the modern day fears of the present zeitgeist of where we are at right now, and the fears that kind of everyone has on the left, on the right, of what can you trust? Are we being lied to? All of it right there. So it's a movie based off of rich source material from Stephen King. It's directed by a lively, very competent director, Edgar Wright, who knows how to bring energy, humor, excitement into every single sequence. We've got a cast who are all a ton of fun, bringing their A game, and even the small little roles in it have someone fun playing the role with these big, lively characters. And once again, it has the budget to actually pull off this large-scale version of the film. All of that said, as much as it's a very well-made movie that's very enjoyable, very entertaining, in certain ways, it was underwhelming. Let's move on to the bad. And simply put, it's a very well-made movie, but it lacks most of the distinct characteristics of Edgar Wright movies. It's the least Edgar Wright movie that Edgar Wright has ever made. It feels like it's playing it safe, or it's playing it very mainstream. And maybe that was the concession that he had to make in order to be able to adapt Stephen King, get this budget. They're like, all right, we want a straightforward, classic, crowd-pleasing blockbuster. And if you work in these parameters, then we'll give you this budget to go do it. Maybe that's what he just had to agree to in order to get the movie made. But when you hear the idea of Edgar Wright tackling Stephen King with $100 million, it doesn't really feel like a $100 million Edgar Wright movie. Right as we came out of the theater, I was talking to my friend Vincent, and he goes, yeah, like, it's an Edgar Wright movie. You immediately think of all these really clever, inventive transitions. And that's not really in this movie. And you go back to, Shaun of the Dead, which I watched just a few days ago, made for a fraction of the budget of this film. And it's just so lively and specific in the style and the transitions. And that was him 20 years ago with a fraction of the resources. And this feels like a movie that is very well made, but a movie that any number of other directors could have made. That doesn't make it bad. And it's one of those things, it's like a tricky comparison, because it's like a director that you're really excited about what they specifically bring to the table. And you watch a movie that you're excited about because of the source material, the genre, all that stuff, and you watch it and go, oh yeah, I mean, that was well made, but I didn't see as much Edgar Wright as I wanted. It's like a specific type of criticism that is like, there's a sense of disappointment, and it's tough to exactly pinpoint it because it's not that what he did was bad. It was just common. It wasn't like you're pointing out, oh man, this shot was out of focus, or this cut made no sense, or the plot made, it's not even that. It's just, I've seen him do things that are more exciting, that feel like, man, that energy. Or you watch something like Scott Pilgrim, which is not really like his other movies, but it's so distinct. It has like such a unique vibe to everything that takes place in it. And you can say that about almost all of his movies, like even Baby Driver, which is a more mainstream kind of movie, but it's even made in a way, and conceptually, this idea of incorporating music into it, the way that the cuts are done, it's all so specific, idiosyncratic to Edgar Wright in the way his brain works. And this feels like one that's made for the general population. It's optimized to be a blockbuster in certain ways. Not that it's a generic blockbuster. I'm not even saying that. It just doesn't feel like Edgar Wright. And the other one here is there are just a number of times throughout the movie where there were just kind of enormous plot coincidences of for Ben to survive and get off on this journey that he ends up going on. there's just like, he just happens to run into the right kid at the moment where he's like most desperate, the most people are looking for him, and like, man, he's boxed in a corner. He just happens to run into this one kid that happens to be connected to this person tied to these other things that happens to be tied to, and there's a lot of that you're like, oh, it's not his wits, it's not his abilities, it's not this, it's he happened to run into this one kid, and then things go poorly, around that 60-70% way of the movie where you think, all right, we're feeling strong about our plan here, and then things start to fall apart and you get a cool action set piece. Why did it happen? Well, it happens because like something that feels like the dumbest of like that's that person, you couldn't control that person, you couldn't stop this. And so it plays out in this desperate sort of like, in a way that you just like the whole thing becomes very volatile over something you were like, that is a very solvable problem that turned into a nightmare, and it felt unearned. There's like two really important things that's a positive for Ben, where he sets him on this path that makes things much easier, and then things fall apart. And both of them are like either coincidences or just like you couldn't come up with anything smarter than that mechanism that kind of pulled it together in some way. At the end of the day, I didn't leave the theater with a big long list of specific negatives or criticisms of the film. It was just this general feeling of it was just significantly more conventional than I was expecting or hoping for the combination of Edgar Wright and Stephen King. And it's not that it's bad, it's just not as potent, as memorable, and distinct as I think it could have been if we'd gotten the Edgar Wright sliders all the way up to 11. This is like Edgar Wright at 6. Remember to join me down below in the comment section. What did you think about the movie? Give me that point of reference. Have you read the book? Have you seen the 1987 movie? Speaking of the 1987 movie, I posted a review of it over on my second channel, Sean Chandler Plus. I cover a bunch of news stories over there, review some smaller things, and in this case, reviewed the other movie, The Running Man, over there. Come back this weekend. I'll be ranking all of Edgar Wright's movies, doing a deep dive into his whole filmography. Overall, The Running Man is a highly entertaining film that builds out this rich world that's explored by a set of engaging characters played by fantastic actors, but as an Edgar Wright movie, it felt very subdued and common. It felt like a movie someone else could have directed it in this way. It didn't have those distinctives of Edgar Wright. It's still very good, but I think if we got the full Edgar Wright, it could have been great. Overall, it's a B+ on the entertainment scale, and 8 out of 10, and it's worth seeing. It's the kind of movie that plays great in a theater with a crowded audience, so absolutely worth seeing, but not necessarily an absolute must-see if the trailer didn't win you over. Thank you so much for watching. Check out that other review right over there, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.